The following video is a parody. None of the people or events in this case are real. From now on, I'll be speaking as though they are. Enjoy the video. Before we get started, if you want a version of this where I am not eating a big juicy burger, pickles, and a milkshake in between telling the story, click in the description. This is a story with a very high body count, all of which stem from the tragic accidental drowning of a little boy in 1958. Before we get started on that, I'm going to take a bite of this. But before we get started, I have to say a big thank you to today's sponsor, Caslin Toys, for sponsoring this video. It may be in the middle of spooky season right now, but the holidays are just around the corner and everyone in your life, no matter their age, is going to want a Buddy doll. The Buddy 2 specifically. This year's Buddy uses cutting-edge, self-learning AI to have real conversations with you. He'll adapt to your routines, learn your behaviors, learn what you like to have countless unique, entertaining interactions. It can connect to and interact with all of your home's smart devices. How cool would it be to just turn to your little buddy and be like, hey, start a movie or turn off the lights? He also comes with an app and several pre-loaded activity options, including playing video games, drawing, and flying a drone. That's right, a drone. The Caslin drone goes from 0 to 100 miles per hour in under 6 seconds. And it can work in any weather, so you don't have to wait for spring to start flying. Caslin is giving my viewers 50% off pre-orders of the Buddy and Drone package. That's the brand new Buddy 2 doll, a Caslin smart drone, and a free full year's subscription to the Buddy app service, which itself is a $180 value. This incredible deal is only available to the first 50 people who use my link. So be sure to get yours now and then come back to the video. I will wait. You need to get this. Thank you so much, Caslin, for sponsoring this video. And now let's get to the case. I've been waiting all day for this. This little boy's mother, Pamela Voorhees, was born in 1930. Not much is known about her early life, not even her maiden name, but we do know that she fell pregnant at age 15 and she married the child's father, Elias Voorhees, sometime between the pregnancy and the birth. Now, there is not much info on this guy. Some people have said he was a local miner in his late 20s. Some said he was a little younger, a fellow classmate, but even then, he would have been at least a senior when he knocked her up because she was known to wear his senior ring. So I'm already not a big fan of this guy. There's bacon in here. I got the peanut butter, banana, bacon, and somewhere in there there's Reese's Pieces. Reese's Puffs. It's so good. I love bacon with like milkshakes. Like I'll dip my bacon from my burger in a milkshake. Looking at this bacon, but there's already bacon in here, so the bacon gets to stay on the burger. I don't like pickles on my burger, but I will have them with. And these are my favorite. Clausen, they're like the only pickle spears that I'll eat except like at restaurants. On June 16th, 1946, at age 16, Pamela gave birth to a baby boy, but sadly not a healthy one. This boy, she named Jason, was born with hydrocephalus, which, put simply, is too much spinal fluid trapped inside the brain. And this can lead to a lot of health complications, namely, in Jason's case, head swelling and developmental impairment. Because of this, Pamela never sent him to school. She was worried he'd be bullied, and she just wanted to protect him. So she kept him at home. She was very watchful, very protective of him. At some point early on in Jason's life, his father seems to just drop off the face of the earth, and there's no confirmed reason for why. But for why? There's no confirmed reason why. He might have left because he didn't want to care for a disabled child, or because Pamela was becoming more and more controlling and possessive in her overprotectiveness of Jason. As there's no record of him existing beyond 1950, it's possible he passed away at some point in Jason's life. Eventually, Pamela's friends David and Louise Christie helped her get a job as a cook at their summer camp, Camp Crystal Lake. She was happy to have a job where she could keep Jason close and with her all the time, and where there were plenty of counselors that she reluctantly trusted to watch over him even when she absolutely couldn't. Sadly, and I don't know if this is normal at camps because I've never been to one myself, or if the counselors were neglectful, but apparently little Jason was left unattended with the other children quite a bit, and they would bully him due to his condition. He didn't speak or stand up for himself or fight back, and of course they relentlessly made fun of him for his appearance. Those who didn't bully him directly were just fearful and avoidant, and so this poor little guy had no friends at this place where kids are supposed to go and have fun and make friends. We are about to get to the first known death of the story, the one that is the proverbial first domino that set all of the others in motion. On July 12th, 1957, Pamela is working as usual. She doesn't have her eyes on Jason, and these other kids at the camp decide to either push him into the lake, throw him into the lake, or just chase him into the lake. It's not clear because no one else was there when it happened, but Jason winds up in the lake. And these kids probably didn't know or didn't think of it, but Jason couldn't swim, and tragically he drowned that day. His body was never recovered from the lake, but the Christies shut down the camp for the rest of the season to allow for an investigation, which concluded Jason's death was an accident, which, yes, it technically was. I don't think any of those kids meant to kill him, but none of the adults who were present and should have been responsible faced any consequences. Aside from the owners, David and Louise, Pamela blamed counselors Barry Jackson and Claudette Hayes for not watching Jason more closely. Barry and Claudette were a couple who worked at the camp in 1957, and they were actually brought back the next year, despite the accident happening on their watch. I will say Claudette especially did seem to really care about the campers. They said she really loved singing to them around the fire, and there's a chance she wouldn't have left the kids alone had Barry not been a factor here. But as far as we know, it was still her choice to go off with him. So maybe kids watching kids isn't the best idea. Claudette and Barry's bodies were found on June 13th, 1958, both killed by a machete. Her with a slashed throat and him with a stab wound to the gut. Their bodies were found near each other and partially undressed, but no fluids were found, which suggests that they were interrupted before they could do the deed. It looked like Barry was killed where the pair would have settled down, and Claudette made an unsuccessful attempt to flee, only to be cornered and slashed. Their bodies were later found by Claudette's roommate, who assumed they'd fallen asleep together and wanted to make sure they didn't get in trouble. Instead, she walked into an incredibly gruesome scene, which resulted in her having a breakdown and having to be sent to the county hospital. Barry's bloody shirt, the one he's wearing here in this crime scene photo, was actually bought by a morbid collector named Nathaniel Morgus. Fun fact. Unlike Jason's drowning, these deaths couldn't be called accidental, so the camp was shut down indefinitely. 3 deaths in 2 years will do that to a business. At this point, they had no leads and the crime became a cold case. There were several attempts to reopen the camp, but all of these wild accidents kept happening. It was as if the universe just did not want this camp to reopen. There were multiple fires in 1959 that kept it closed for that season, and when they tried again in 1962, the camp's water was found to be poisoned. Over time, the camp, now known locally as Camp Blood, went from a bad to a cursed reputation, and no one wanted to send their kids there anymore. Camp Crystal Lake would remain closed for over 20 years, until in 1979 the Christies' son Steve made one more attempt to reopen, spending around $25,000 on his efforts, which would be a little over $100K today. 1980 would be the final year that Camp Crystal Lake hired any counselors. On Friday, June 13th, 1980, 7 new counselors are brought in to give the camp a fresh start and prepare for campers. I don't know why they're starting so late into the season. I feel like they could have done this in May, but it's not my business. I've never been to camp. Annie Phillips, Alice Hardy, Ned Rubenstein, Jack Burrell, Marcy Standler, Bill Brown, and Brenda Jones, all in their late teens to early 20s. Jack and Marcy were a couple, and Ned was their friend, so the 3 of them drove in together. Annie was seen earlier that day at the Blairstown Diner asking for directions to Camp Crystal Lake. Everyone there was taken aback by her request, but a friendly truck driver did agree to take her halfway to camp. Even as they were leaving, a local known as Crazy Ralph tried to warn her against going to Camp Blood, but he was ignored. The truck driver said he also tried to dissuade her from going, despite agreeing to take her in the first place. I don't know why he did that, but he said he told her about its dark history and the drowned boy and the murders and all the mishaps since that made it cursed. But Annie was perseverant. She was gonna go. So she pushed on and he dropped her off where he said he would to continue hitchhiking, but Annie never made it to camp. Her body was later found in the woods near where he dropped her off with her throat slashed. Back at the camp, Steve left to get some supplies in town, which left the counselors to their own devices. Brenda set up the archery range before everyone went for a swim together. Later that night, Officer Bradley Dorff went to the camp looking for Crazy Ralph, but he came up empty and had to leave for another call. That night is when the killings began. Again. Based on how the bodies were found, it's believed that Ned was killed first in an upper bunk in one of the cabins and left there. Jack's body was found in the bottom bunk, pantless, a cigarette in his hand, and with no signs of struggle, just an arrow through his throat from below. His girlfriend Marcy was found in the nearby bathroom with an axe wound to her head. She was wearing a shirt and underwear, and while it wasn't tested against Jack, seminal fluid was found in her and suspected to be his. The way their bodies were found paints a very sick and twisted picture of how this all happened. The killer slashed Ned's throat, left his body in the top bunk, waited underneath the bottom bunk while Jack and Marcy had sex right under Ned's body, having no idea what was above or below them. The killer waited the entire, well, okay, what, 5, 10 max minutes? Waited the entire time they had sex. Marcy gets up to use the bathroom afterwards. Smart girl, pee after sex. And they're both killed once isolated. This killer does not like to take on more than one person at a time. Brenda's body was found in the archery range, and since it was storming pretty badly that night, it's believed that she was lured out there somehow. Like, that's not somewhere you would just be hanging out in the middle of a storm. Apparently, Alice heard her let out a solitary, terrified scream before she was killed, which led her and Bill to check Brenda's cabin, where obviously Brenda is not there, but there was a bloody axe, the same one used to kill Marcy, in Brenda's bed. Alice is obviously freaked out, and Bill is trying to calm her down, saying maybe it's all just a prank. I mean, Ned had pretended to drown earlier in the day as a prank. So it's probably just that, right? Bill. Be so for real. Be so for real, Bill. But the pair breaks into Steve's office anyways to try and make a call, only to find the phone lines have been cut. They tried to take Jack's car to town, but it's not working, so their only option is to just wait out there for Steve to come back. Unfortunately, Steve never made it back to the counselors. He was found stabbed to death next to the camp's entrance sign. The power then goes out in the cabin, and Bill leaves Alice there while he goes to investigate it. When he doesn't come back, Alice goes after him and looks in the generator cabin. She doesn't see him, so she goes to close the door, like lock herself in and try to stay safe there. But when she closes the door, Bill's body is pinned to it. Now that she knows there's a killer out there, she leaves that cabin, runs back to the main cabin, tries to barricade herself in, and then Brenda's corpse comes flying through the window to the wall. As all of this is happening, Alice hears a car outside, and she runs out thinking it's Steve and they can leave and get away from here. Instead, she's met by Pamela Voorhees, who introduces herself as a friend of Steve's parents. Alice tries to tell her that they should leave, but Pamela is not paying attention. She seems more focused on how sad the sight of Brenda's body is. She starts going off on how Steve shouldn't have tried to reopen the camp because it's cursed, and about how her son died 20 years ago and it's the counselor's fault because they were all off having filthy sex and left the kids unattended. She says that this day, June 13th, is his birthday, and she starts accusing Alice of personally killing her son, which is obviously insane because she wasn't even alive back then. But Pamela is completely detached from reality at this point, and honestly was well before this. She pulls out her knife and Alice runs away, pursued by Mrs. Voorhees. Alice finds Annie and Steve's bodies and goes to hide in a storage shed where she finds a shotgun, but the ammo is locked up. Pamela catches up and they struggle some more before Alice gets loose again, runs back to the main cabin and hides behind a door, and then when Pamela comes after her, she comes out swinging with a frying pan and manages to knock Pamela out. And she thinks it's finally over at this point, so she goes outside, sits down by the lake, just exhausted, trying to catch her breath and deal with everything that just happened to her. Suddenly, Pamela comes at her again with a machete. Alice dodges this machete attack, knocks it out of Pamela's hands with a boat paddle that was laying by the lake. They keep struggling. Alice gets a hold of the machete. She kills Pamela in self-defense by decapitating her with this machete. Alice does not remember much after this point, understandably, but apparently she paddled out to the lake in a canoe and passed out. The next morning, Officer Dorff and his partner return to Camp Crystal Lake and find Alice still unconscious in the canoe. As they call out to her, she starts to wake, but her last and likely most lasting torment was a trauma-induced hallucination of Pamela's son, Jason, emerging from the lake and dragging her underwater. She then woke in the hospital, convinced it actually happened. This poor girl internalized the blame that Mrs. Voorhees projected onto her from 20 years ago. And she probably ended up haunted by his memory, similarly to how Pamela was. Thankfully, she didn't end up killing anyone over it, but so much tragedy came from this one accident. And it's really sad that Pamela couldn't let the past just die with her. She took it and she put it onto this new person before she died, and then Alice carried it. I hope Alice is doing well if she's still alive. It's understandable that she kind of went private after that. This is not a case with a lot of clear facts. We just know kind of what happened and the story that Alice told the police when she was found. I want to hear your thoughts on this case. It's a very, not up for interpretation. Obviously Pamela was very unwell and in the wrong, but I'm curious what people think about, were those initial counselors responsible for his death because they wandered off? Should they have wandered off? Was it perfectly fine for them to wander off and leave these kids alone to play with each other? Was she even right in blaming those first two victims in the first place? Obviously she was wrong to kill them, but did those first two counselors even deserve the blame for what happened? Even though we're talking about it and these events happened a long time ago and the location of this camp is technically public record, I want to advise against anyone going there. It's just a generally unsafe location. People have tried to break into it. It was condemned. It was closed off to the public. People still went in. There have been further incidents and accidents at this campsite. So if you want me to talk about the history since then, let me know in the comments. If there are other cases you want me to cover, let me know. I do have some that I'm already working on, but I would love to know what you'd want me to cover. Let me know if you enjoyed the meal with this story, or if you would just prefer the stories without a meal, or if there's different food that you would like. I'm quite new both to doing this type of story and mukbang videos, so I'm very open to suggestions. A big thank you again to this episode's sponsor, Caslin Toys. Be sure to get your Buddy Drone package, pre-order that in time for the holidays. Get one for yourself, honestly. Like, it does not have to be a gift. Or get two, you know? The deal works for multiple ones, but you have to be one of the first 50. So if you didn't already, get to that link. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.